This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Maximus. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, pressing the pause button on ChatGPT, driving research excellence with digital and data modernization, and sharing the work and the wins in the intelligence community. Welcome to FedGov Today with Francis Rose. The Energy Department has hit the pause button on using ChatGPT. FedScoop reports Energy is just one agency that's taking a broader look at how it uses generative artificial intelligence. Ann Duncan's the Chief Information Officer at Energy. Ann, welcome. It's great to talk to you. What's behind the pause on ChatGPT in particular, and what are you thinking about generative AI in general across the department?
Thanks, Francis. So the issue around ChatGPT and the pause is a little complicated because DOE is a complicated place. So at headquarters, we put a pause quite a while ago, actually. This is a bit of old news on ChatGPT, and we said we wanted to have a chance to look at that. Other parts of DOE, the plants, labs, sites, everyone took their own look at it and have set different rules about who can use it, who can't. In every case, we're making it available to people who have a business need to use the tool. But there's more to the story as well. We got a group from across DOE together, over 100 people, to talk about how we're going to use generative AI. So what's the big picture? Because we have at least two main uses for generative AI, right? We do research. It's a big part of our agenda. Part of that involves AI. We also have to run our operations. We want to make sure people can use AI in the best way possible to support operations and to make DOE a better place and make it run better. So that group that got together of 100 people has worked on guidance for how in DOE we can use ChatGPT. What are the rules of the road for ChatGPT and other tools that will make us more successful in that space? Keeping in mind there are lots of different tools, and keeping in mind we have lots and lots of policy already in place. We don't need new policy, just some guide rails to help people. The other thing we're doing is we're setting up a sandbox within DOE. So the discovery zone is what we're calling it, and if you want to be able to understand how to use AI in a safe place, we're creating that space for people to do that.
One of the pieces that you and I have talked about many times in the past, Ann, is how all of these things that you're doing at an agency, whether it was when you were at EPA or now at Energy, fit together. And you called that recently, you wrote about the ever-expanding agenda and how all of these things fit together. What does that look like? And I'm talking about AI, cybersecurity evolving into zero trust, data, and so on. Lots of things that you're managing. How does one go about keeping an enterprise view on all of those things rather than going this direction and this direction and this direction?
Well, that's a small question, Francis.
Yeah. We only have 10 minutes.
Yeah. So I think the point about that ever-expanding agenda is those things show up and they don't go away. So if you look just at the cybersecurity agenda, it builds upon itself. And occasionally you'll be able to say, okay, we've done this new thing and we don't need this one anymore. But otherwise, if you look at Zero Trust, IPv6, all the different activities around cybersecurity, just because we started doing CDM, for example, we didn't finish CDM, walk away from that and do the next thing. Mm-hmm. So we have to figure out how do we continue to implement all those programs? What's our highest priority now? When we look at priorities, it's not about compliance, it's about how to be more secure. So how do we reduce our risk? And then how can we comply within the framework of reducing our risk? And maybe something that 2 years ago was really important is less of a priority. At the same time, to your point, there's AI, there's big data, there's all these other things going on. Each of those brings opportunities for the organization, but it also brings new challenges because every one of those new things that we get, the bad guys get it too. Mm-hmm. And so not only do we have to figure out how to use it, how to use it well for our organization, but we have to keep our employees safe from other people who are using that same technology. So it's a matter of not taking our eye off any of those things and trying to figure out how to spread our resources over an ever-expanding group of activities without an ever-expanding pool of resources.
So that's exactly what I am getting at, though. How does one keep a broad enterprise strategy in mind with all of those pieces as components of that strategy rather than getting distracted by whatever the topic du jour is?
That's an excellent question. So I think part of it is having a good strategy and plan. Mm-hmm. So we've been working this year across DOE to make sure that we're all aligned, so that we're all working towards the same objectives. We have a strategy for my office, we have an operating plan, so we make sure that we don't forget any of those pieces. And that requires having a plan. It also requires making sure we're coordinating across all of DOE. And then it requires being able to respond when new things show up. You know, like quantum just shows up. AI just shows up. All those things show up, you have to adjust. But you have to go back to that plan. You have a long-term strategy, and then you have to be able to respond to that every year.
In addition to the things that show up, though, you have the things that have been there for time immemorial. You have legacy information technology, I imagine, that you're working through, technical debt like every agency, and all of those things. Again, how does one throw those things into the mix and sort through all of them to establish priorities? Is there a matrix? Is there... What does that look like?
Yeah, so we have to understand what we have first, and that is a huge challenge in an organization as large as ours, is understanding all those systems that are out there, and each one of them needs to have a plan to move it to be modern. And so, yeah, it's a bunch of databases in some cases. It's a bunch of matrices, whatever it is that you have to put together to figure out what you're doing. So we have, for example, we're working through our organization to inventory for the federal part of DOE what our legacy systems are. We handle the non-federal part a little different, but what are our legacy systems and what are the plans for each of those systems to get modernized? A big one right now is we're going out and modernizing our HR solutions, and that's going to get us away from a bunch of the on-premise stuff. So not sure if I'm getting fully to your answer to your question, but it's basically figuring out what you have, and then to the greatest extent possible, making sure that more of that is being run through products that require less attention. You know, nothing is free, right? Just because I put something out in the cloud does not mean I get to walk away from it. But if I can buy someone else's product rather than build my own, then my responsibility for managing that is smaller. I don't have to worry about upgrading it. I still have to worry about ensuring that my part of that is secure, that my vendor's doing the right thing, that my data is well managed, et cetera. But so we're trying to minimize that footprint of responsibility for things, or maybe I shouldn't say responsibility, but that footprint of effort within our responsibilities, as well as understanding the whole scope of everything that's out there. And then you layer on all those requirements on top of that other people are kind enough to give us, that some of which help us a great deal, and some of which maybe don't. So.
Regarding modernization, you were, if I recall correctly, you were one of the first CIOs when you were at APA to talk about the fact that modernization's probably never going to be done. There, for years, there was an idea that we'll modernize the system and then we don't have to think about it for some period of time. Is that the approach that you're taking at Energy as far as modernization goes? This continuous cycle, and this is not something we stop and start at some future point?
Yeah, you've got a good memory, Francis. Thank you. So yes, one of the things that we try and do is not create the next legacy system. But to your point, modernization never ends. So we can make it easier in terms of going to the cloud, and not just in the cloud in the sense of we put our systems in the cloud, but that we're using a cloud service provider so that we don't have to worry about upgrades, right? They're going to do those upgrades. We still have to examine those upgrades, understand what they are, make sure they don't change our security posture, make sure they meet our users' needs. And ultimately, eventually, you have to look at whether you have the right products in your ecosystem. And that's where that continuous modernization goes on. At some point, you say, you know, for example, I won't name the names, but there's a particular area of security where a lot of people are going from one vendor to another right now, because we've looked and we've said, this isn't really meeting everybody's needs. We need to move on to something else. So that's where you're going to be constantly modernizing, but hopefully what you don't have is that huge technical debt that goes along with it as you get away from having lots of custom-built on-premise products, and that's where we're trying to get to.
Is that a residual effect that maybe hasn't gotten as much attention as it should in the modernization discussion, that if one is continually modernizing it, you reach a point, I imagine, where you don't have a ton of legacy and you don't have the technical debt that agencies have accrued?
Eventually, I am sure we will get there, and it will be a good day when we do. And I think there are some departments and agencies that are getting there more quickly than we are, that are smaller. We got a lot of work to do still, but you know, one of the few advantages we have at DOE is we don't have a lot of public-facing systems that we have to worry about modernizing, but we have lots of things that enable our employee success, lots of things that enable research that are still on-premise, or that are still things that we have built ourselves, or our vendor-provided solutions that are on-premise that we have to upgrade and manage ourselves. And all those things we want to move away from. Now, there will always be, particularly in the government, where sometimes you are a customer base of one, right? There will always be IT systems that you have to build yourself. There are also, from our standpoint, we do research, right? We will always have research systems ourselves. We have the fastest supercomputer in the world right now. That is not something that we're going to give away and say, oh, we don't need that, right? We create new capabilities with our computing. We don't just create capacity. So we will always have our own stuff. But to the extent that the things where we don't need it, we can give it to somebody else to do for us, and we can manage that relationship and ensure it's secure. That's a much better place to be.
And Duncan, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Thanks, Francis. Great to be here.
You can read more about what Ann and her team are doing at Energy on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, driving research excellence with digital and data modernization. FedGov Today with Francis Rose. We'll be right back.
Innovation in Government from DoE, presented by Carasoft, is available now on demand. This program showcases the intersection of technology and government, with insights from government and industry leaders on topics like AI, modernization efforts, secure data movement, and quantum computing. You'll learn from leaders from NGA, DIA, SOCOM, and lots more. To learn more and watch the show, visit innovationingov.com.
Welcome back. Researchers across the federal government are using the IT infrastructure tools Ann Duncan talked about to make breakthroughs in energy, healthcare, and lots of other areas. Those tools will help researchers mitigate risks in their work too. Raymond Holder is Vice President of Digital Growth at Maximus. Ray, welcome. It's great to see you again. What are some of the risks that those people, researchers in particular, are up against across the government, and how are those infrastructure tools helping them to get the job done?
Well, Francis, it's great to be here. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, so when you look at researchers, there are a host of things that they have to do. And it's like the trends of technology and all the risks and things are stacked up against them. So one of the first things they have to do is gather information and turn it into usable information that they can actually execute on. And so the studies have shown that 80% of a researcher's time is spent on just getting their arms around that data, but not even talking about transitioning to get it to be actionable and executing against that analysis. So that's one of the first things. And that's an area where technology can be an enabler, right? How do you change that so that instead of just getting your arms around the data, you can actually use it as a strategic tool to help us create the future of energy?
Yeah. Data as a strategic asset is the terminology that the government has used and that the private sector organizations are using too. Is the way to get at that the tools themselves, or are people maybe thinking about it the wrong way and should be thinking mission first?
Well, it absolutely should be mission first. One of the things that I always tell people is that it's about making technology make a difference. And so one of our customers, consulting customers at the National Energy Transformation Lab, Technology Lab, EDX, they have done a phenomenal job of incrementally innovating, step by step, focused on what is going to make those researchers be more effective. And so over the last 10 years, they developed tools that have helped them analyze information, gather information, publish those findings, connect with researchers around the world, and that kind of progress and that kind of acceleration is what Energy is doing and what other agencies need to emulate.
I mentioned risk, and we talked about that a little bit before we went on the air, what the risks are for those people who are doing that work. What are they able to do to mitigate those risks themselves, the researchers, and what's up to the technology team that supports them, that works with them, collaborates with them to help them mitigate? Sure.
So there's a few things. One is, just from an enterprise perspective, you got to create a secure, scalable infrastructure. If you've got thousands of researchers and there are thousands of people registered for the Energy Data Exchange, you've got to have a secure infrastructure that they can stand up their tools, they can use the tools, they can share the information in a way that is not going to leak, is going to make sure it's compliant with all the privacy regulations and rules. Those are things that as an enterprise you've got to do. And then you've got some training to do, right? It's only as good as the degree to which the people that are using it can actually benefit from it. And so it's kind of you look at it from both sides. One of them is from an enterprise, create that infrastructure with security baked in, and then on the other side, focusing on the users and the researchers and what they really need to do.
How do you measure success in an area like this, Ray? How does one know we're secure enough, we've mitigated risks enough? Because that whole risk management framework is challenging, I guess, to know we've stomped them all out. That's almost not the point, a lot of risk management experts tell me.
Sure. I mean, at some point, you're never going to be, quote, secure enough.
Right.
You can be as secure, just like being healthy. You can't be healthy, you can be healthier, right? But it's not an end point. So the key that we've seen from people that have been most successful is continuous innovation, continuous integration, and continuous development. That's kind of the key. If you start small, you think big, and you incrementally improve, as long as you've got a secure infrastructure and you've got an environment that you can play and experiment with things, and you know nothing's going to leak, you know it's secure, it meets all the requirements, then you're heading the right path. It's
like I talked about with Ann a moment ago, there's not really an end point, as she described about modernization, there's not really an end point to this either, it sounds like.
There isn't, and I encourage people, attack the status quo. You know, I mean, if you're a sports fan, you kind of inherently know this, that if your team has its stars that are pushing 40 and the rest of the team is in their 20s, there's some inherent risk something might go wrong. There's a ton of risk in the status quo of these legacy systems. And people often overlook that because they're focused on the change and the risks associated with change. But attack that status quo, start small, and iteratively, incrementally iterate, and make sure you do it in a secure way.
Only about 20 seconds left, but There's more risk a lot of times, people say, in leaving things the way they are than there is in changing systems, right?
Yeah, there absolutely is. And if you look at the recent legislation, but the infrastructure bill, there are huge goals. Trying to be carbon net neutral by 2050, that's huge. And the only way you're going to get there is by making sure you're constantly moving forward, doing it securely, and attacking that status quo.
Ray, it's great to talk to you again. Thanks for your time today.
It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it.
You can read more about how researchers are leveraging digital tools on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, sharing the work and the wins in the intelligence community. FedGov Today with Francis Rose is back in a moment.
Here's Jeff Deal from F5 on Innovation in Government at DoDIS, brought to you by Carasoft.
The next innovation is around protecting a vulnerability or a risk for a customer. You can point to any number of open source vulnerabilities that have taken place in the sector in the last 3 to 5 years. Well, part of the challenge there is it's a shiny object syndrome. As soon as there is a open source vulnerability, the IT security sector is going to tell you every way that they can think of to solve that. So I think it's incumbent upon us to go demonstrate to our government customers how we're efficiently or more efficiently or effectively addressing some of those issues, right? I think that's a big part.
For more, go to innovationingov.com.
Welcome back. More and more of the intelligence community's components are moving classified data and applications to the cloud. DIA CIO Doug Casa talked about that on last week's FedGov Today TV. You can watch that on demand at fedgovtoday.com. Leaders in intel organizations say one benefit they're getting is more opportunity for collaboration. Linnea Jones is Chief Information Officer at the Central Intelligence Agency. At DoDIS 2023, she tells me that collaboration is nothing new.
The reality is we work together all the time because we all have enough more than the work to do to work together on issues and concerns. And so the IC and the DoD frequently work together because for one, a few of the DoD elements are also within the IC, namely your NSA, your DAA, your NGA, and others. But there's a lot of work we share working with, say, cloud service providers or working with vendors or many of the hundreds of companies that are here at DoDIS today. And so I want to emphasize that partnership because it really is a team sport and there's really a role for everyone. As we were talking beforehand, I think one of the key areas is, I have the pleasure and honor of being the CIA-CIO, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention my partners internally at CIA that help to make the mission possible. Within CIA, we have Ms. Jennifer Link, who is our new incoming CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer. So very proud to serve alongside she, as well as Mr. Hurley Blankenship, who is our Chief Data Officer for CIA, all the acronyms, right? And so it's really a partnership. Sometimes people used to say the digital C-suite, and so there probably isn't an issue, a concern, or topic that we aren't working together. And I think that just cascades across the community, across across the agency. You know, when we were speaking beforehand, another key topic that I don't think anyone in the tech community can make it through the year without saying AI. No. AI this, AI that, it's everywhere, right? And across CIA, similarly, we kind of did a little bit of a transformation in that we have collapsed and consolidated all of our AI efforts and set up an AI office, and it's led by Ms. Lakshmi Raman, and huge advocate and partner, just doing phenomenal work, looking at how we can bring together large language models to integrate data and information, to be able to really use those capabilities to help produce intelligence. And so that's one of the key partnerships. And I think, again, the vendor community, we couldn't be more proud to serve alongside with the cloud service providers. They're bringing, you know, amazing capabilities on various networks and platforms, from not just the classified domain, which we primarily work on, but at the unclassified and secret level. So very much looking forward to that and the partnerships, and just more excited about what we will accomplish in the future.
You can't spell CIA without AI. So
look at that.
It would seem logical that you're working in that realm.
Absolutely.
How are you setting your priorities out for 2024? I imagine this is the time of year that you're thinking, absolutely, what do I want to accomplish? What do I want my team to accomplish? Where do we want to be in the coming year?
Yeah, so you bring up a great point, and really increasing capabilities, service offerings, moving up the stack, right? So we did a lot of work with infrastructure as a service, but now we're moving on to platform as a service, software as a service, and really looking at how can we do the integrated capabilities to make those programs and projects and services available. So a lot in the applications world, whereas where AI comes to bear in that. In addition to that, I think we talk about the partnerships, but one of the key beauties is that healthy competition, right? We all have a lot of technology advances, but I think the true beauty is to be able to blend capabilities and solutions, so that way we can really be able to choose based off of the mission, the need, even the turnaround time as to what we want to offer, right? So I would say for the next year, we're looking at a lot more integration and agility. We don't want to be pigeonholed or stuck to just one solution. We really want to be able to use multiple. And I think that's very important in the tech sphere as fast as it progresses. One of the key areas that we will continue to echo and just really push forward is cybersecurity, right? So that'll always be key in the, you know, intelligence community, as we say. But I think where we're at now is more of a mature area than we were before. Now with the zero trust architectures and looking at least privilege and being able to really multi-factor and pivot and make use of those technologies, I think that's some of the key areas that will continue to progress. And so for the future, those would kind of be some of the big ones. Underneath all of this, of course, is the data, conditioning the data, understanding the data. We are producing enormous amounts of data, and we know that that will just continue to echo and grow. We can't approach the problem in the same way now that we did years before, because we'll get, you know, consumed by the answer because there's just so much data. So it's more of looking at how can we use these solutions in order to focus on the niche areas, the information, and curate the data that we need, as opposed to looking at everything all the time, because that's just not possible.
Mm-hmm. Doug Casa, the CIO at DIA. See, I'm having the letter issue too.
I gave you the same problem.
Yes. You passed it along. Thanks. Was here earlier and talked about some of the things that they're doing and that they're offering to their partners across the intelligence community. What does that look like from your perspective? Not specifically what DIA is doing for you necessarily, but how you're working with the other elements of the IC. Yeah,
so that's a great question. A lot of people may not realize, but we within the Central Intelligence Agency do have the pleasure and honor of providing quite a few capabilities and services to the intelligence community on behalf of the D&I in partnership, right? And so very humbled that we have delegated authorities provide quite a few services of common concerns that we would say are SOCs. One of them being the Commercial Cloud Enterprise, or C2E contract, right? And so that's one of our largest. But please, I always like to share that that's just one of them. There are many other SOCs that we also work in partnership with the community, such as Identity Credential Access Management, ICAM. CI plays a huge role in that, and data services, conditioning data services, providing open source data service layers, all of that. that. And so there's quite a few, but those are some of our big ones. But we'll continue on as long as they continue to entrust us. We will continue to stand front and center and proud to do that for the community.
With ICAM being as important an element as it is of the zero trust architecture and of the effort that the IC is undertaking along with the rest of the federal government, what does that mean for the way that you interact with other organizations? I imagine that really puts you in a pivotal role for helping not just CIA with zero trust, but everybody across the community. Yeah.
I think that's a great example. ICAM is one of those services of common concern that we actually, although we are leading for the role, we work in conjunction with the National Security Agency and the National Geospatial Agency, right? So Geospatial Intelligence Agency. We got to make sure we have the intelligence in there, right? And so Mark Shadland at NGA and now Scott Fear at NSA, we're all together working on that and really being complementary in what we're providing, right? So NSA, not surprising, a huge background in encryption and PKI and those aspects. NGA, fascinating, just amazing mapping capabilities and partnerships across the DoD, providing that multi-fabric layer. And so we all kind of bring that together in order to provide an overall enriched intelligence format and form. But I think when you look at ICAM, sometimes you look at it as like one piece of this, one piece of that, but our goal is to be complementary, so we're not duplicating effort, but really focusing on the areas, the things that we do best, and then bringing it together to work together. And I think us at CIA, we have a huge, long-standing background in open source intelligence. That's really how CIA was founded during wartime. I spoke earlier, we just turned 75 last year, so 75 years young, and so we had a birthday last year. But we always will go back to those OSINT roots of how we came about. And I think, of course, human, right? Human intelligence. And so very proud of the work that we have done and the partnerships that we have created and the ones we'll continue to foster for the future.
You can read more about collaboration in the intelligence community on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
Innovation in Government from DoDis, presented by Carasoft, is available now on demand. This program showcases the intersection of technology and government, with insights from government and industry leaders on topics like AI, modernization efforts, secure data movement, and quantum computing. You'll learn from leaders from NGA, DIA, SOCOM, and lots more. To learn more and watch the show, visit innovationingov.com.
Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, West 2024 is coming from AFCEA International and the U.S. Naval Institute. West is back at the San Diego Convention Center February 13th through 15th. This year's edition has a great lineup of sea service speakers, the largest exhibit floor in West history, lots of special events and networking, and a lot more. You can read more and sign up at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks very much for watching. Have a great week.